Hey, hello everyone. Everybody is trickling in right now, but we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome to our February workshop. Whether you're joining live or watching via recording, we hope today's discussion can help answer some questions you may have or common questions that have popped up around this topic. Lindsay Valdez, our VP of Audience Strategy, and Mark Dixon, our Senior Product Manager here at Freestar, will be walking you through all things first-party data. If you haven't joined one of our workshops before, we like these to be more of an open discussion where questions are more than welcome and encouraged. You can drop your questions into the chat at any point during the workshop. We leave about 30 minutes for the presentation, and then we do like to do a little Q&A after, but you can drop questions in at any point, or feel free to raise a hand, come on camera, and chat with Lindsay or Mark directly. This will be recorded and sent out via email for you to refer to after, including the deck. So be on the lookout for that in your inboxes later this week. And we are excited to kick things off today. So without further ado, Lindsay, I will give it over to you.
Thank you so much, Caroline. We are excited to be here today. It's great to see so many faces, familiar names and faces up on the screen here. So echoing Caroline when I say questions are welcome. We love to meet and know our publishers at Freestar that we work with, as well as anyone else who is joining today. Mark, I believe, at least with me, this is his first time doing one of these webinars. We do roughly one a month, bringing to our publishers the hot topics, traffic driving tips, SEO, Google topics. Many of you are repeat joiners here with us today. So I'm excited about this one. This is a topic that's pretty major. There is, even for the last full year, Mark and I have been so heads down on the topic, as well as many others on our team at Freestars. This is just something that none of us in the ad tech industry can ignore. So as Caroline said, the topic is first party data for publishers, different strategies. Did I skip a slide? I did. Let's back up one. There is the agenda. I was like, where's the intro here? So a quick state of the industry, some terms and definitions, as this is a total buzzword bingo of all the different things they could mean. And it's also a very technical topic. We have benefits of first-party data, why you, who were our direct audience as publishers, how publishers benefit from first-party data. We will be covering what Freestar thinks. This is not a one solution fits all. There was nothing handed to us to say this is the route you should take, which means there's been a ton of exploration here. And we are going to share what we think, our own identity strategy, why this matters to publishers, why it matters to us, desperately matters to us, and then some publisher calls to action. All right. So third-party cookies, been around since 1994. They are,
Whoa,
what?
third-party cookie, 1994. Like, did anybody care? What was a third-party cookie in 1994? I only cared about the cookies that were in like the cookie jar, literally chocolate chip
Okay.
cookies.
Yes, not those kind of cookies. Some of us on this call were wee children in 1994. However, they were the base for programmatic advertising intended for ad serving, user targeting, and cross-site tracking. These are the things we all know and love to follow us around the internet from site to site, delivering us ads that are highly relevant and can be a good experience. There's some things on the screen I put for what they're used for. So when we found out, oh, Mark, you might not know this off the top, was it 2020? I feel like this is year 4 in which we truly have heard since cookies are going away.
Well, that was 1994, I think. Yeah, it's been a long time.
Yeah, that they are going away. We've been talking about Google at least saying that for years. On January 4th of this year, Google removed 1% of Chrome. third-party cookies, and that was roughly 30 million users with plans, which we will see if that works out to completely as they have laid out, but by the end of 2024 to see fully deprecated third-party cookies. So that's why we're here today. The problem at hand is without these cookies, right? We're a bunch of humans in the room here that in some way are of this ecosystem in which you're either making money from ads, delivering ads, or using them to reach your audience. And without the third-party cookie tracking, how will advertisers be able to find the users they want with a proper attribution? Much relies for the publisher. This is revenue, right? Advertisers, as we know, pay more to get to that audience they think will convert for them. If it's just this wild, wild west of just, where will my ads end up without the proper attribution for advertisers to trust and understand, you can all see how CPMs will be lower. All right, Mark, anything here that I'm forgetting as to why we're getting started?
No, let's go.
All right, so to get everyone on the first page with some key terms and definitions. Identity. If I had a cookie for every time I heard the word identity or a dollar, I'd be very rich. This is just a word that took over and being like, understanding what it meant just at its most basic level is the ability to identify a person online. So this before has been being done with third-party cookies, and that helped with identity. Without that, we explore different paths. But once the user is known, advertisers can reach those people who may be interested in products or services and attribute the success of those efforts. So simply put, identity is a person online. This could be in a known or unknown manner. Third party, first party, the third party ones we were just talking about, generated and placed on the device. They go from site to site, and other than the one the user is visiting, that's where they're placed on by that. First party cookies are only set by the domain. So I think we, in more simpler terms, is what I'm talking to publishers, they collect it. You, the publisher, collects the first party data, information you collect from your customers directly, and then your own strategy kind of goes out from that versus starting with other people having those cookies. All right, Mark, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, so two major kind of forms of IDs that we see are data, deterministic and probabilistic. I think the names are pretty self-explanatory, but deterministic, it's really what we know about the user. So that might be, from the user themselves signing in, so information they're providing in a login, a registration process. An email address is the example we'll probably use most throughout this presentation. But that's the deterministic data. So you know who the user is, 100%, no doubts. Probabilistic, that can be other data points that, can be compared with some of those known user profiles and say, hey, this looks like it probably is the same user. We don't know for sure. They haven't given us the email address, but it's quite likely this is the same person. So that's two kind of major types of identification and data systems that are in play here. When we talk about the privacy sandbox, I'm sure everybody's probably familiar with this. It's the collection of APIs in Google Chrome that are intended to solve for some of the use cases in the advertising ecosystem without third-party cookie functionality. And the Topics API is a part of that privacy sandbox that enables the interest-based advertising without using third-party cookies. So it's really user interest and behavioral targeting without the third-party cookies. And next. So what are we seeing today? So we know Safari and Firefox stopped supporting third-party cookies a while back. One of the questions that we see is like, how is this any different? Like, why should this concern us compared to like, hey, we moved on from Safari, we moved on from Firefox doing that. The big thing I think to consider here is that when that happened, a lot of marketing spend shifted to Chrome. So this time there is no Chrome with a large market share and third-party cookies that marketers can just funnel their spend towards. So this is something to keep in mind as far as like, why is this a major disruption? Why is this something to consider? And make sure that we have a strategy in place to counteract third-party cookies going away. The other thing is some of the solutions that work in Safari and Firefox today are really identity graphs that have Chrome cookies as a big part of that spine. So again, another reason to think about like some of the ID solutions maybe that are in market today may not work as well or be as effective once third-party cookies go away. So that's kind of the cause for concern. What do we know from Chrome's 1% test already? We, like some others in the industry, are tracking this, looking at like what is the performance delta when cookies are enabled versus disabled. We haven't put anything out publicly yet, but I can certainly say that some of the numbers that are floating out there around the 30% to 40% kind of drop in CPMs looks pretty accurate to us. Is that a cause for alarm, though? I think one of the things we have to realize is we're not at the tipping point. The other 99% still exists, and that's where a lot of the marketing budgets are still targeting. Why would you shift away from that? Well, you can still target and use that functionality. The solutions that are live in the 1% test, are really just in that kind of test mode, figuring out, are those pipes working? Putting test budgets towards that, figuring out, what does it look like to be able to measure that, again, from an advertiser perspective and measuring attribution. So it makes sense that the CPMs would be lower at this point because there aren't the budgets funneled towards those new and emerging solutions yet. So cause for alarm, but not really in that sense, because what we're going to see is that spend shifts. That spend is still going to be there. Marketing spend is still going to be, trying to target the users, the audience, the brand KPIs, just as they are today. The question is going to be where it shifted before from Safari or Firefox to Chrome. Without third-party cookies, where is it going to shift now? And what solutions do publishers need to have in place? What strategies do we need to have in place to be able to make sure that we're able to capture that spend where advertisers want to spend it and see those positive outcomes? I think we're open to pausing at any time if there are questions.
Yeah.
I think, Caroline, if there are any questions coming in, feel free to pause us, but otherwise we can move on.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, obviously viewing that spend will shift, there's going to be alternative strategies needed. What does that look like? What is the single solution, or what is the alternative to cookies? And I think we see pretty clearly that there's going to be no single solution. There's not one thing that you can plug in that's going to work for all publishers, all different audience types and content niches. There's going to be a need to implement multiple solutions and take this, what we were calling a multi-pronged approach to the deprecation of third-party cookies. So looking at things like alternative IDs. So IDs that may be deterministic, maybe probabilistic, but how are those helping solve the buyer problems of being able to measure and attribute performance of their campaigns? How do we test from the publisher side? How do we test and measure what's working? As I mentioned, maybe some ID solutions that seem to work and add value today in environments like Safari and Firefox, maybe they're not going to work as well once third-party cookies go away. So how do we make sure that we can test and measure the things that are out there, the solutions that are emerging, and be able to adapt as clear winners of come into play? The privacy sandbox, sorry for the bad puns, but we don't want to put all our cookies in one jar there, but we do want to support the privacy sandbox and make sure that we can capture any of the revenue that marketers are willing to spend through those Chrome APIs. Obviously, it doesn't cover all browsers, so that's a key thing. We want to be able to cover or have solutions that cover Chrome and Safari and Firefox and all the different environments where you have your audience. But we do want to leverage the retargeting spend that will come through the PAPI or Protected Audience API, for example, utilizing the Topics API, and some of the measurement APIs as well that the Chrome team has made available. So that, I think it is a key part. We want to play in that sandbox, but not be limited to that, have solutions outside of it as well. And so that really leads to kind of the next point here, driving innovation through the open source community. Again, it kind of relates to some of the alternative IDs and making sure, having strategic partners. Who are the partners that are going to be able to help drive revenue for your site? We believe at Freestar very heavily in the innovation that's occurring in the open source community, among some of those ID vendors, among some of the SSPs and DSPs and buyers that are involved in that community. We really truly believe that there's kind of another sandbox at play within the open source, where we will see a lot of innovation coming out this year, and that things don't have to be just limited to the privacy sandbox. And then, of course, first-party data, which is really core of what we're talking about today, making sure that we can leverage those high-value first-party signals. So that could be a user that logs in and being able to use that hashed email that is in some ways more beneficial than a third-party cookie in terms of managing the relationship with the user and for the advertiser to be able to target on. But also contextual data. I group that in here as well as first-party data, not just about the user, but what's valuable about the context in which that user is found on your site, and what signals can be provided up to the buy side to see why they would see value in targeting those impressions on your site.
I'm so
We
glad
had
you
a question come in, Linz, and Mark. Someone said, are there any particular verticals which have had a larger drop in CPMs without third-party cookies?
Any verticals in terms of like content verticals, publisher side?
Yes, I would.
I think, assuming the question is related to more of the 1% testing. So that's something we can certainly dive into a little bit more. It seems like it's fairly consistent across the board from what I've seen so far, but
I was going to say the same. I think the data that we've looked at, there wasn't a large amount of just a certain content niche or type of site from what we can tell so far versus others. I'm glad you mentioned that contextual part to add to this list, because what you're looking at is the most simplest form of our own strategy. These are the different pieces that work together. And this is not just a Freestar issue. This is obviously any company that is monetizing publishers, monetizing websites in the way that we are, is having to walk these sort of new paths and waters to test and try. And that is a huge benefit. I know we have many different account managers that work with our publishers more directly, but this has been something they've also had to follow, and our customer success team has had to learn a lot about this since it's been such a hot topic, and being able to facilitate discussions, kind of keep publishers certain that nobody knows exactly what we're doing right here, but these are the things you would have to be doing if we weren't. That's what we're here for, to be testing these things and putting together the perfect mix of how much is in each of these different buckets.
Yeah, I don't want to wrap up too early and say we're done, everybody go home, but I think the highlight here is that things are evolving, and it's expected that there's going to be that change and shift in spend. So I don't think there's a need to panic just because, oh, the 1% CPMs are down. It's true, spend is going to shift. So the answer is just, look at, what are these alternative solutions? What is that multi-pronged approach? And how can we dive in to be as prepared as possible to leverage those solutions as that spend begins to shift?
I want to go back to that question real fast too. Although there might not be a certain vertical that has taken a larger drop in CPMs, I think there's other as a whole in a trend I've seen, and this is not just related to third-party cookies going away and what are we going to do about these CPMs, but expanding content and what you're covering to different types of content, right? You stay in your vertical to address it, but by diversifying revenue sources, and we get into in a minute, while they're kind of all tied together, because as you offer different services and products and ways for your customer to engage, it also gives you a perfect way to be collecting first party data, then take that and monetize that better through those channels. But just to also think of, is there like an affiliate or e-commerce play? Is there other things on your site that can continue to drive that audience? All right, I'm gonna go forward. Oops. Okay. So there's some advantages. We've heard a whole lot of doom and gloom over the last, again, as mentioned, this is a common discussion we're having with publishers, and the panic and telling them there's a long game here. This may not be exactly, of course, if with the CPMs, depending on how that goes, it might not be a seamless transition, but the long goal certainly is that this will be a better outcome. Better solutions will be introduced. The internet will be better. How you're monetized, the privacy plays a part. All of these things, many are seeing it as a positive. While the slide we just talked about on some of those IDs and such, these are the solutions to help. Now we try to fill in the gap without the third party cookie with the different IDs, but essentially with the goal to, of course, be a better monetization, better experience for advertisers and monetization for all. So there are some key advantages, some benefits of first party data in advertising. When you own the data yourself, you control the strategy more than being at the whim of others. And it gives publishers, it's through, we're at Freestar exploring the different ways in which to gather audience data. A very important part of this picture is the audience data, but that is more reliable insights into your own audience. We work with publishers to become better businesses. It's not just about, of course, that's a large part is CPMs and ad revenue, but when you understand your audience more, you can drive, you have better content, a better UX, better on-site experience, and we believe will be better long-term businesses for all of these efforts that we're embarking on right now. The value exchange. This is something, if you've had any conversation with me, I talk a ton about having, right? We're also all users, which is the fun part of everyone on this call. You're also a user and you know how protective you are over your own information online and what you give out. There must be a value exchange with the users for them to be willing to do that. As long as you are keeping that in mind in your offerings via content, then many users are willing to give an email address. And then with the even added benefit of building loyal audiences, the very solutions that we talk about that will increase your amount of first party data, it's also providing a better community experience, on-site experience, likely for your user. And when you can take that average, once every now and then reader and get them to come back again and again, this is a very loyal, this is very valuable for your audience. When you own your own data, there's more transparency, control over the way and the way that you're collecting it. We all have a ton of questions around data privacy. That could be its own webinar. But to the fact that when there's more transparency and there's less worry around that first party data than third, one of the more exciting and will be forthcoming in many more strategy discussions is the segmentation of your audience, right? The more you understand and can group them around their likes, dislikes, who they are, you can cater content to them. I'm seeing the trend of newsletters, in a sense, being broken out into different topics within a brand. Understand that all publishers are different on the resources they have to drive these efforts. However, when you can segment them and then go through various means to an advertiser, PMP deals are on the rise. It's a huge focus here at Freestar, and when we have those audience segments, it's going to help a ton with that. And then lastly, deterministic signals can drive higher CPMs. We've touched on that. We want to keep the CPMs high for our publishers. Therefore, we're going to do everything possible to get the right mix of IDs to continue to drive those.
Hi, Linz. We've had some questions come through. Joe's question I'm going to save because we have a slide on this, but we had another question come in from Demian. If a tiny fraction of our users are registered, will hashing emails really impact CPMs site-wide? I am skeptical because I don't see why an advertiser would infer better targeting with such a small sample, and they can already guess targeting pretty effectively with ComScore and Nielsen.
Yeah, so my thoughts on that are, again, as Lindsay has already said, that we do understand that different publishers, your content is different, your relationship with your users is going to be different. I don't think anyone who looks at hashed emails and that kind of deterministic strategy as being like a full solution, again, full replacement for cookies. It can't be, because even in the best of cases, you're not going to get 100% of your users to log in or sign up or whatever the case might be. But I do think, anything that you can drive there is going to help. For one, even some of the identifiers that can do both deterministic and probabilistic matching, it'll increase the accuracy of the probabilistic matching. The more they're able to identify the users or certain users, by that email or whatever other deterministic data they can match on. But I think again, really just to drive home the point that some of those solutions are going to work better for some publishers and some content verticals. The relationship that you have with your users, I think it's just we see already that where those signals are present, it can drive a higher CPM, even while cookies are still present. So in terms of spend shifting, being able to capture as much of that as possible, even if that's only a few percentage points, it's still going to make a difference.
I will also admit though, as we've tried to put together internally, like what we're testing, who we're testing with, we of course took that into consideration, right? You have to look at the site and see that value prop. We try to think to ourselves, at least this was the like early days of trust testing. We would say, of course, we don't want to waste the time of a publisher to put something in place yet. That's such a small percentage. Let's work with a publisher that their whole business model relies on a user to log in. So we've tried to take that into account in our early phases, only to prove out that there's other reasons. There's also different packaging options, or further down the line as we evolve these, if you are even on a small percentage, as Mark just said, that could be still beneficial. Also, lastly, to that point, you will start thinking of ways to grow that. So that is sort of the goal. We of course know it will never be 100%. It would be a stretch to ever consider it to be 50%, but we don't know yet. And so your model will continue, or should continue, to drive in the sense of that direction to get more of it. Okay. Caroline, was that the only? We're good till I go forward?
Yeah, we can go forward. We had a question on newsletters, but we have a slide on that, so.
Okay. All right, so what should publishers do? We try to make this as much for call to actions today. As you can tell from the last few slides, Freestar is doing our part to nothing's falling through the cracks. We are testing, we are having the right tech in place to take care of that. Now, what should the publisher do? I had to jump the gun, I guess, because it came up already previously on another slide, but consider the value prop. This is a great time for you to think of, all the, what are we on? Decades, as 94 was mentioned, decades that has led up wherever you are in your business path of being a publisher, to take a look at what you're offering. It is, there's key trends in all the things that I'm talking about within the audience strategy realm that tie into diversification, that you want to offer different things. If you're merely publishing content and that's all that's on your site, and I still do look at some sites that do not have a newsletter pop-up or social share buttons or commenting or a login option anywhere on their site. So you have a user that's going to read it. There's what's after that. And I'm very not, it ties together in being trustworthy as a brand. This is something I stress a lot when we, if you have a newsletter, right, that there's a transparency, there's a back and forth, there's a relationship you're building with your user. So it's kind of how should I say it? You're suspicious of brands and content that you land on that offer me nothing other than this article. And you can kind of go. So to take a good look and what tools, services you're offering, what are your competitors doing? That's a cheap shot, but you should understand what your competitors are doing, what their websites offer, what content they cover. Do they, this is largely also a marketing conversation too. What could you do for your users that would increase the amount of things that they can get from you as an industry leader in whatever your niche publisher site is. Quality should be a priority. Brands are going to find a way. This will get solved. It might not be completely smooth. This will get solved. We're confident that it will, in the end, be better than before, but quality should always be a priority of publishers. I've had a lot of conversations in the last year about traffic loss. Same thing. Like, this is all tied together in your own website and brand. Quality should be a priority. Your traffic will be better. Premium brands want to be there. Think of think of your own favorite publishers and websites where you get news, what sites you visit. There's certain things that provide better experiences. Quality drives engagement, which drives CPMs. These are very important. You want many of the strategies, which is the next slide on how to gather first party data, is because will help the overall quality of the site. And then the approach for getting more first party data is also the audience data aspect. You should want to know more about your audience. PMPs will be a focus area of the future for us, and this is where all things are somewhat driving. So keep all of these things in mind.
Before you move on, Linz, I just wanted to kind of echo on that kind of quality and the first party data. It kind of goes back to Damien's question as well. It doesn't always have to be a hashed email as the solution. When thinking about like, what is the reason that a user comes to your site and why is that valuable to a marketer, right? So maybe that user is not going to be willing to sign in or log in or engage with something where they give their email address. But what is it that would be, really first party data about, the context about why that user is visiting your site that would make it attractive to the marketer that is looking to attract that user to their brand. So I think that those are kind of ways to think outside the box a little bit in terms of building out those kind of that PMP strategy. We're obviously pitching Freestar here a little bit in terms of helping our publishers be able to do that across our network of publishers and providing that scale for buyers. But like, if we can put together those kind of categories of why there is that value exchange. Again, that value exchange, what's the quality of the site? What's the reason why that user is there? And telling that story to the buy side.
So you would consider even metrics as far as like Google Analytics metrics, right? That's first party data? Is that first party data?
Yeah, I think that there's a story to be told about like, how long the user is on the page, how viewable your ads are, anything else, about, why the user is engaging and how they're engaging with your site.
Yeah, when I
That's
think
part
of
of the story.
Reporting I've done back to brands over the years prior to being at Freestar, many times they're very impressed to learn that their articles perform 3 times as well as the average when on a certain site. And positioning, building a story there can come in multiple different ways from first party data. All right. So how to gather more of it, right? If this is going to be part of the path, not all the path, part of the path that any publisher should be thinking of is how to get more of this. And it does not need to be just a one solution. If you take a fully fleshed out business, think of the leaders in the world, they're going to have many of these different things and use those in complex audience strategies. Some of these I'm seeing more than others as in the last, I'd say 2 or 3, maybe even as far back as 3 years, where you really started seeing to nothing like it is now, where you're getting asked a ton on almost any current site to log in some way, or they're like keeping articles, but it's a lot less free out there, let's say this year, than it has been in other years. But there was the concept many years back of getting logins and starting that sort of user profile and understanding them. So many sites today, when we're coming in the network and we're trying to assess how valuable and how deep, what capabilities the publisher may have, how complex their own strategy may be with data, a login wall, we see it commonly. It collects details. So this is the one where you're going to have to set, sign up. Basically signing up, that's good. It could be any number of things. We all know, any marketer knows, the shorter the better. So many I'm seeing like quick, just it can be so smooth that in times like that, I'm like, oh, that wasn't that hard to give it, when it's just literally, something smooth that pops up, allows you to continue to read the article you're on. If you just drop an email address, that can usually get me if I'm on an article and I want to finish it. It's annoying, doesn't mean I'm not annoyed, but I will drop my email to continue to reading something on Digiday or some other source that is of valued information for me personally.
Just to throw out there too, like there's some good single sign-on solutions. You know, there's
Yep,
Trade Desk Open Pass solution. There are ways to do this even without supporting walled gardens.
yep,
That
single
can make
sign
it
on.
more.
That's a good one when you're seeing it more from site to site. It's becoming even, yeah, not
It's
even
just making it less of a hassle for the user, right? Where it's single click.
Yep, very seamless. Newsletters. This is something I have been talking about for 15 years because there's tons of other value in newsletters. I'm used to having talks about how it drives traffic, but I wouldn't say it's typically in the top 5 traffic drivers for a publisher, but there was always an added value because of who that user is. If you think about, you've signed up for something, you're asking to hear me send you communication. That's maybe to me the most valuable of users is your newsletters. In the way that you can just communicate with them. Publishers can also group audiences and use specific campaigns based on customer behavior. I was mentioning this earlier. I signed up on Interesting Engineering, one of our publishers, for their newsletters yesterday because we are working on getting their first party strategy in place to see that they had 6 different options of different newsletters. So there can be a strategy in which you can use that to further segment. Interactive content, surveys, quizzes. This is maybe a less common than the first 2 that you see above, but not out of the ordinary to see things in even so much in taking publishers have allowed them to take up ad space, right? I see in real estate where they could be making money to use that space for a quick survey and then there's various different strategies that go along with that. Deals, if I don't mention that. Go ahead. So I'm gonna
Yeah, we
pause.
had a few questions come in, and I think this might be a good time to answer them. So one of the questions, you sort of already chatted about this, but there's a second part to it. So from Joe, it has been recommended to me that we collect email addresses for people to read my content. I worry that it will push more people away from visiting my site more than anything, which would then hurt any ad revenue because of a dropping traffic. Thoughts on this? But also, would it require the person to sign into an account on my site with that email address every time to read free content, or would there be a cookie placed on their browser that would trigger after they simply enter an email address?
I'll take part 1. Mark can take part 2. I SEO at heart. That is where I started. No one could be more sensitive to user experience than myself. So same, first of all, Joe, same. I believe there is that, there used to be an old term like first click free. I don't know if that like totally ages me, but you didn't really ask your user for much on the first few clicks for that very reason. And I am of the advice that's the same. There's different strategies. You don't have to, you can make it 5 articles a month and then you're prompted. You can set this in place. We certainly, and this has of course been brought up, like, oh, my bounce rate increases the minute I put that on. Less invasive, the better. Tread lightly. No one's asking a publisher to put up a giant, block that blocks the content in exchange for that data.
I mean, you could, but
You could. I do believe you'd pay the price in other ways. You have Google search out there, and as much as I hate it because they're reliant so much, right? They're the beast that relies on advertising revenue. They're cautious and sensitive to those kind of things in the search results. So telling a publisher to do something that then they could get in trouble and lose organic search, I would say just keep it very clean and user friendly. Have it not be, have it be seamless to the user. I was on a website the other day where you're just kind of scrolling, you're reading the article, it gives you the article for free. But somewhere within it is a call to action in a box. It kind of light boxes out a little bit, but as the user scrolls, it went away. And I felt like that was a very nice way to mix the two. We're giving me a chance, think of it as a benefit for your user in some cases, giving them something of value, but not being too invasive. What do you got, Mark?
I think you just both kind of or both parts of the question here. I think some of the answer is, again, just being able to adapt and test what works best for your audience and site. I know that's a little bit of a non-answer, but I do think that's true, that the answer for your site is probably going to be different than someone else's site. So it is about trying to be able to test and figure out what works. In terms of requiring the person to sign in every time, I think that's more about like the expiry
That's what I was
of the
gonna say.
login.
Mm-hmm. Yep, you certainly, there's options. I've heard some have much longer settings and the user doesn't have to log in. That's something that you can set personally.
And it is something I would say optimizing too with the identity strategy in terms of any ID vendors that may want to refresh that ID within a certain number of days or something. So it's not like leave it for years and the user logs in for like, I don't think that would work. But having a reasonable timeline where it's not like I come back half an hour later and I'm prompted to sign in again, that obviously wouldn't be a good user experience.
I default to user experience, but it's certainly a strategy and a balance and something that you should equally be caring about getting from your users. And that can be also in the form of some of these things that you see on the page. With a sort of decline last year in Facebook and Twitter traffic, these sort of communities that that people valued at one point, I saw a lot of that fall back to the websites. There were publishers that were saying their forums hadn't had as much traffic as that did last year in years. It's because humans are going to find community. I feel like that's a certain thing. It's just, where's it going to be now, right? If people are mad at X and don't trust Facebook, and maybe it's on your site, maybe there's a play for having comments on your sites. This is something that both of these were, so commenting and forums. Those were things that were the chunk of years I told publishers to move away from. And that was the advice, because user generated content could not be moderated correctly. It was toxic and Google penalized for it. And all those were still true, except for I have found the technology behind those systems have gotten so much better. They have AI built in to moderate comments and get, not just like block these 5 bad words, but you can, there's much more complex systems nowadays that you can block certain styles of content or negative things. And it just depends if you don't trust users commenting. But do explore the technology a little bit more, because people are valuing those conversations. All these things go back to what I talked about with engagement. Purchases, that's clearly not going to be for every site, but purchasing data is very valuable if you have that happening on your site. Ratings, reviews, this is giving your user a chance to give direct, immediate feedback. That is something that I think outside that, you think recipes, but that's not the only thing. You have products, you have other things that you could create in which you're getting this feedback for, and social buttons. I wasn't sure if the world was going to adapt to like the Twitter logo going away and all of a sudden it's here. I'm seeing, the old offenders of Facebook, a lot more Reddit. Anyone knows that kind of joke happening with all the traffic Reddit has seen in the last 6 months, which is now filled with spammers. Reddit social buttons picked up on that, and X, things like that. So social buttons, giving your users, all of these things can get you more first party data. Walled content, kind of talked about this when it comes to the login, but this is one of, especially if you're like a content publisher listening, there's so much opportunity for you to create something. Those were just some examples there, but to create something that your users, not all of them can get. Even if you have like a subscription model, it's more common now for me to see those freemium style models that give maybe the publisher not all articles, but 15 articles a month. Like you can make an actual package in this, not just like give me your email to continue reading this one thing, but you could provide something that they would be able to fill out user profiles for, which is the next slides. I'll go to it. But walled content is the ability to say you created a gift guide, the best 15 tech products for this holiday season. You only get it quick, just email drop, and then you can either email it to the user or allow them to go ahead and read that article. Things are a little, when you can make it as a marketer on the marketing side of the publisher, if you can make it exclusive, you can make it something, and you also have a brand, a quality brand that they trust. All things work together to move your business ahead. People love this kind of stuff and are willing to give information for it. And then the user profile, which I just mentioned. So putting together something where you're getting a little more. So I definitely get the email and the seamlessness at all. But if you do have things on your site that are just of higher value or tools, say you're like a tool site, like there is an aspect of people, it pains me to say this, pay to play, like, okay, you don't need to give them everything for free. Their concept, they expect it a little more over time. Sadly, their brains will shift to be like, this is the norm, as things evolve, which is in all cases of the world. So it might not in, years from now, or even this year, be so much of a turn off, Joe, as your point, to the user. They may expect it depending on where you're offering. Now, when you can ask for a little more information, follow a little more, and build a true user profile on some of your audience, there's 20 times more engagement. That's just a loyal audience. They're willing to go through those steps. What you'll be able to monetize them moving forward will be of the highest value. So consider that if you're offering, especially again, like a tool or games or something outside of content.
Linz, I think one of these questions relates to this, and I know you sort of already chatted about it, but from Jeremy, most of my users are logged in and I have their email addresses, but I'm not doing anything with that data. What am I actually supposed to be doing right now?
Well, Jeremy, if you're with Freestar, just kidding. All right. It depends again, right? If you're using any company to monetize, there's that partnership I would hope and think would be happening, that you're not out there on an island trying to figure out this for yourself. Mark, what should he be doing?
Yeah, we kind of cover that in terms of some of the ways that we are doing that, if you are with Freestar.
Yeah.
But I think there are multiple identity vendors that will support passing through those signals, building that into their identity graphs. And so that's one of the things that we do. And kind of to what Lindsay was just talking about too, in terms of what more can you do as a publisher in terms of building the user profile and leveraging that as well. Maybe that's the way you serve content, when you offer those kind of sweepstakes deals, when you promote some of those, maybe potentially, registration wall content. That, I think, it just enables the ability to do more, with leveraging that loyal audience. It sounds like a bad way to put it, but I think, yeah, just that's obviously a key part of growing your business, on both sides. Just building that traffic loyalty, but also building the ability to monetize that traffic effectively as well.
I'm gonna take a minute to throw out an email address too, because Mark and I, we have discussions about this every day. You can read, I'll throw out audience@freestar.com as just an alias that goes to the both of us if you have follow-up questions. Jeremy, if you want to tell us a little bit more about who, I'm sure we can get a better answer for you on that, depending on your domain and hearing a little bit more. So feel free to reach out. If you are monetizing with Freestar and you are, again, there's so much behind the work stuff that's being done. If you haven't reached out to us, don't pay, and are with Freestar, don't panic. All this stuff is happening, but there could be more. There could be more we're doing with as Mark alluded to, hashed emails, solutions there. So reach out to, again, lines of support, Caroline, Mark, myself, your customer support manager. We're here to support that, to help those steps. Any other questions?
We do have a couple more questions. I didn't know if you wanted to finish this slide because I think this is the last one, and then we
Okay.
can maybe go into the other ones.
Yeah, absolutely. This slide, for so many reasons, when you as a publisher are investing in, not just prioritizing, investing in engagement in your site, it could be an expense to get the technology on your site that fosters the commenting aspect I just talked about, or to get this login running and those, or right, the different tools that it takes to keep the user on the page, but it's a total investment that has benefits, not just for what we're talking about here today, but also just UX, also traffic from Google and other sources. When you have those availabilities on your site, you tend to understand your user better. And there's ad targeting opportunities associated that. This was some of the GA stuff. We brought it up early, but it's thinking a little bit outside the box. It's not just about the login and getting that email address, but you can put together an entire strategy, understanding what articles they click on, what marketing offers every time you offer this certain thing, that user signs up. That's a way to custom communication is a trend I've seen in the last year. Custom as in more segments, right? Getting a group of users within your site and targeting different things, their direction. If they share content, commenting, that's a great way to also value your audience. All right. We can take questions here. This went by fast. I had a great time talking through it. Change is the only constant in ad tech. It's been a wild world of the last year when it comes to identity, but it has, everything points to a positive outcome in the long run. And as Freestar, we're here to help you stay on the cutting edge of identity solutions and leverage that first-party data. Any other questions, Mark?
Yeah, we had some questions. So from Matthew, how about a Freestar contextual finance, sports, auto, etc. marketplace plus publisher first party data plus LiveRamp email ID?
Okay, say that one again.
Yes.
Yes.
I don't know if there's a follow-up question, but I mean, yes, this is ultimately, I think, what we're driving towards and looking at with that multi-pronged approach is being able to combine all of the different ways that can help, marketers target, but also measure and, look at attribution of their campaigns. So I think that's one of the key things is, and it's maybe more of a challenge with some of the contextual solutions. It's like, okay, you can target this contextual data, but what does that mean for the advertiser to be able to measure performance of that? And that's where I think the combination then becomes important, because even with some of the like first party based IDs, I'm not talking about hams or hashed emails. I just mean like even things like shared ID that we deploy across the board for our publishers. Those can really help then with building that solution through the open source community in terms of ways that buyers can then measure, okay, I targeted this publisher's contextual data and this campaign worked this well for me and I achieved these KPIs. So that is ultimately the overall story we're looking at being able to tell is like, great, you have the email, let's get that in there. We know that deterministic data point is likely to drive higher CPMs on its own. But when you can start to combine that with the contextual data, any of the first party data that you have on your users, I think this is where we can tell a compelling or start to craft that compelling story.
And one thing that's along these lines for Freestar publishers, we have people on our teams that have close relationships with the SSPs and do group out contextually and are making sure that that audience is being seen. There's certainly work to do here as things have evolved, but that is something we focus on. It's one of the more requested things is to understand still like reliance on that contextual. Who are the publishers in your network that have to do with automotive, being able to make sure that the different SSPs we work with are understanding the value of that inventory in that segmented way. So that has been and is already part of our strategy.
Great. And then the last question we had is from Seth. Some of these ideas are more email collection, like asking emails for sweepstakes requests versus authentication. In that scenario, I have an email, but I don't have that tied to a user and their traffic, etc. How useful is that versus having registered authenticated users, user profiles, so that I know who someone is when they're on my site?
I think to make it simple, it's like that talking about the front end of like what is the user experience in terms of how do you collect that data, but then very important, obviously, to then make sure, and this ties into the whole privacy side of it as well, like in terms of the privacy disclosures, your privacy policy being up to date, like all those check boxes need to be in order. And then when you have that solution for collecting that data, whether it's an email or some other form, but in this case, an email, how are you tying that back to the user? And I think that's where, again, speaking within the kind of Freestar ecosystem, being able to pass that through and creating the IDs with multiple identity solutions based on that. But I think looking at like, is there a use case for you to start building out your own identity graph based on that data and how you want to use that for some of the use cases that Lindsay has talked about, whether it's the content, audience strategy side. Hope that answers the question. Like, it's high level. Obviously, there's a lot more technical details in terms of how do you actually do that? How do you take the email that the user put into that sweepstakes form and make sure that you're passing that through to wherever it needs to go? But that's obviously critically important to not just collect it, but do something with it.
I will throw out email addresses and names one more time. Mark Dixon, myself, Lindsay Valdez, Caroline here. We audience at freestar.com if you have follow-up questions. If you're a Freestar publisher and want to start exploring hem pass-throughs, that is, yeah, just email and we can get all those things going.
I see a comment from Matthew. I agree. I don't know if you want to read that out, Caroline. But
Yes, we had a comment from Matt. So I feel we as publishers will need strength in numbers now more than ever. If Freestar can help bring their publishers together somehow into segments with the publisher first-party data and email IDs, that will make it an attractive and easy go-to place for buyers.
Quote of the day. Love that.
we agree.
We agree. And are working on it actively. Well, thank you all. Thank you all so much for taking the time today to join us and walk these uncharted waters alongside.
Yes, thank you, everybody, and we will send out a recording of this and the deck later on. So as a reminder, just keep an eye out for that. And thank you, everybody, and I hope everyone has a great rest of their Thursday.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.